All right, let's talk about something real. That feeling, that deep, heavy, physical ache you get when you even think about saying no to your family. Today, we're not just talking about culture. We're going deeper. We're getting into the science, the actual neurobiology of Filipino guilt. Let's do this. You know the drill. It's 2 in the morning, you're wide awake, staring at the ceiling, doing what I like to call the 2 a.m. calculation. You're running the numbers on your cousin's tuition, your parents' medical bills, and that Gcash request is just sitting there on your phone like a little digital time bomb. You know you can't really swing it, but just the thought of typing out no makes your chest feel tight, your stomach drops. So why? Why does a simple act of self-preservation feel so completely catastrophic? And look, let's be super clear about something. This isn't another talk about toxic families. We're going to get way more specific. We are going to investigate the actual brain science behind this collective guilt. We're talking about the literal hardware and software inside your skull that makes saying no feel like a threat to your entire existence. Okay, so to really get this, we have to meet the main character in this whole neurological drama. We need to look at the exact part of your brain that's acting like the command center for this incredibly intense feeling of guilt. It's called the Anterior Cingulate Cortex. Let's just call it the ACC. Now think of the ACC as your brain's own personal conflict monitor. It's physically located right between your emotional brain and your logical brain, and its entire job is to constantly scan for social conflict, to pick up on any signals that things aren't quite right between you and your people, your tribe. And here's the absolute kicker. For anyone raised in a collectivist culture, that ACC is programmed with a super primal, ancient equation. It goes like this: social harmony equals safety, which equals survival. But social conflict? That gets registered as a threat that feels a lot like death. It's an old survival program that's still running the show today. And what's wild is how fast this all happens. First, your ACC spots what it sees as a conflict error. That's you just thinking about saying no. Instantly, it shoots an emergency flare to your amygdala, which is basically the brain's emotional inner toddler. And because of a lifetime of conditioning around things like Utang na Loob, that really deep cultural debt of gratitude, your brain doesn't just see a simple disagreement. Nope, it registers a full-on tribe rejection event. Now you throw our modern world into the mix, and this whole thing gets turned up to 11. With our family group chats and social media, there's nowhere to hide, right? There's total transparency. You see every single need, every passive-aggressive post, every little hint. And this puts your ACC into a constant hypervigilant state. It's always on, always firing, always scanning for that one thing it fears most: family disappointment. For the Filipino brain, that disappointment is the final boss. So that's the emotional side. But how does this all translate into actual physical pain? Because, and I need you to hear this, it is not just in your head. There is a very real, scientific reason why this kind of guilt can feel like you've been punched in the gut. Okay, this is it. This is the big reveal. Groundbreaking fMRI scans have shown us that when you experience social rejection, a part of your brain called the somatosensory cortex lights up like a Christmas tree. And guess what? This is the exact same region that activates when you feel physical pain, like if you burn your hands on a hot stove. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference. The pain is just pain. So please, let this really sink in. You are not being dramatic. You're not being overly sensitive. When you feel physically sick after setting a boundary, it's because your brain is literally flooding your system with pain-signaling neurotransmitters, things with names like substance P. To your nervous system, the emotional pain of being rejected is processed just like a physical injury. It's real. And this response didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's been hardwired into you for years. Think about it. As a child, you were probably rewarded for being quiet, for not being a burden. As a teenager, if you dared to express your own needs, maybe you were met with tampo, that special kind of silent treatment. Over years and years, your brain was effectively pruned to create this incredibly powerful association. Setting a personal boundary equals the terrifying threat of losing your home base, your safety, your entire tribe. But what about the other side of the coin? What happens when you just keep ignoring those internal alarms and always say yes? Well, that comes with a very steep long-term biological price. Let's take a look at the physical damage. Well, every single time you push down your own needs to please someone else, your adrenal glands pump out cortisol, the stress hormone. And when that happens over and over for years, it can lead to something called HPA axis dysregulation, which most of us know as adrenal fatigue. The symptoms, they're classic burnout, waking up totally exhausted even after 8 hours of sleep, walking around in a brain fog all day, craving salty foods like crazy, and feeling like you have absolutely zero emotional resilience left in the tank. And when we say zero emotional resilience, that is not an exaggeration. Your body is basically going into a kind of metabolic shutdown. It's literally burning through its future energy reserves just to keep up with the demands and expectations of today. Your body is screaming no at the top of its lungs because your mouth has been conditioned not to. And this, of course, is where things get really complicated, right? Because older generations might see you setting a boundary and call it selfish. They might say, walang utang na loob, that you have no gratitude. But from a purely medical perspective, the logic is brutally simple. You cannot pour from an empty IV bag. This isn't about being selfish anymore. It's about basic survival. In fact, science is showing us that chronic guilt and the inability to set boundaries are linked to higher rates of really serious things, like autoimmune diseases and hypertension. So we have to completely reframe how we think about this. Setting a boundary is not an act of war against your family. It is an act of essential, preventative, biological maintenance for yourself. So here's the billion-dollar question. Are you stuck with this forever? Can you actually change these deep, deep neural pathways? The answer, thankfully, is yes. You absolutely can. So let's walk through a practical, no-nonsense framework for how you can start. Okay, here are 3 steps you can start using today. Step 1, recognize the glitch. The moment you feel that heat rising in your chest, I want you to pause and name it. Just say to yourself, this is my ACC firing a false alarm. I am safe. Step 2 is the wait and see protocol. Never, ever say yes on the spot. Your new rule is to give your logical brain at least 24 hours to think it over. And finally, step 3, use low-yield communication. You do not owe anyone a novel. A simple, I'm so sorry, but that's just not in my budget right now, is a complete sentence. Period. The whole goal here is repetition. It's about practice. Because every single time you successfully set a boundary, no matter how tiny, and you realize the world didn't actually end, you are teaching your brain something profound. You are physically building a brand new neural superhighway that starts to associate boundaries not with danger and rejection, but with safety and self-preservation. So let's wrap this all up. If you remember nothing else from our time together, please remember these 5 things. 1, that Filipino guilt you feel, it's a very real biological conflict error happening in your ACC. 2, your brain processes social rejection as actual physical pain. 3, chronic family stress can lead to very real conditions like adrenal fatigue. 4, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it is essential biological maintenance. And maybe most importantly, 5, you can rewire your brain. It is possible. And all of this leaves us with one final, and I think pretty crucial question. When you're up against decades of cultural programming and literal brain wiring, learning to protect your own health and your own sanity, well, that might be the ultimate test. So, are you ready to pass it?